My name is Jonathan Miller, and I'm president and CEO of Miller Samuel, which is a real estate valuation firm based in New York. We appraise individual residential property and prepare market research around the country on the state or trends of various housing markets. LLCs have been a very popular way for purchasers of apartments, especially at the upper end of the market, to remain somewhat anonymous. And there was a significant news story that investigative journalism piece that came out of the New York Times that really looked into this. And there's certainly people that buy real estate that are pulling money out of places that they shouldn't and are investing it. And it is a phenomenon that we're seeing not just in New York but anywhere in the U.S. However, the use of LLCs has been around a long time. When you think of the Manhattan real estate market or any market where there's high-end real estate, you have celebrities, you have billionaires with children, you're concerned about privacy and you're trying not to be in the public eye because the transactions are recorded in public record. And so the LLC was a popular vehicle to protect your identity. One element of that is that people use it for reasons that are not necessarily good, which is taking money out of, for example, a foreign country where they're from, and they're investing in taking advantage of that privacy, so it makes it harder for people to discover what they've been buying. There's nothing insidious about it. It's just like anything. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. I think the challenge is that in New York real estate now, the prices of properties and the creation of this very super luxury category now has more and more people much more concerned about it, because people involved in the transaction don't really want to know about where the money came from. It's just, you know, the builder, the broker, anybody involved in the transaction is just trying to have the transaction occur. And I think over the next decade or so, I think we're going to see a little bit more concern about that, because the real estate companies that end up being connected with this sort of activity, that can be brand damaging. And I think there's going to be a greater awareness as time goes on about this type of practice. The way to think of an LLC is it is a partnership, or it's an agreement between parties, and it operates, it's like a corporation, except for it's more difficult for the identity of the owners of the LLC, the managing partners, the managing principals, to be identified. And that serves many purposes, some good, some bad. So the problem is, and especially as it relates to the market, the housing market in general, and especially as we're coming off, we're still in the hangover period of the financial crisis, or really it was a credit bubble with housing as a symptom. Housing was just a byproduct of what that was all about. That was the legacy of it, was not being able to link individuals to properties. That if there was a foreclosure or a problem, there was no trail. It was very difficult to go after an entity legally, to be able to correct a deficiency in the property. People were being foreclosed on properties. They didn't know, no one knew who owned it. And that's a challenge that we're still grappling with. The fire or gas explosion in the East Village, that's the next level, which is how do we resolve the liability issue for the damages that were created by, and what was the reason for the explosion. It is difficult. It's more difficult for individual parties to go after property owners. However, I think there's a misunderstanding. I think that there are many experts out there that can find out who is behind the LLC. So it's not as if it completely isolates or protects, it's just one more barrier. The problem is when you have, I would think, LLCs nested within LLCs, nested within LLCs, and it gets extremely complex. We run into that sometimes in our matrimonial or expert witness work that we do the parties, you're not quite sure. There's so many sort of variations of who the client is. You're not quite sure who your client is. You don't have a point person or a legal bullseye or target to go after when there's some sort of malfeasance. There's something that happens that has to be corrected, which is one of the reasons why LLCs have been a popular legal vehicle for many years. And part of that is because of frivolous litigation as well. That's also a big problem, and one of the reasons why LLCs have been so popular. It's just another way to insulate the owners to a certain degree, but it's not that hard. You know, in the case of businesses that do that, ongoing concerns, yes, there's some, I guess, some insulation in that regard, but believe me, it isn't. It doesn't stop litigation. It's just one more layer. I think you have to look at it as a layering of protection for the business owner more than some veil of secrecy. I think when it comes to property, you can take anything and go to the extreme, and that's what the New York Times article a few months ago really focused on. But that isn't the norm in terms of the purpose of it. I think the purpose of it in property is to limit frivolous litigation and also to provide privacy to especially when you have very large dollars involved. And that's the, at least in my day-to-day experience, that's been the primary motivation for it. And because your lawyer says to do it that way.